Alrighty, phase three of peerScholar. So cool. Hopefully you've kind of got a vibe for this so far. Um, you've written your first piece about the research paper you found. You've now assessed the compositions that a bunch of fellow students submitted based on the criteria we kind of laid out for you. And now we're at a point where once again the goal here is to give you practice thinking critically, thinking creatively, and communicating. Um, and there's something I just thought of that I wanted to highlight, by the way. In the previous assess phase, I didn't highlight this going in, but one of the other things that are important about this experience we're trying to give you is that you saw how your work compared to that of your peers. We think it's very important that students should see the work that their fellow peers are doing, and if they see a good set of work, say six, that gives them a good idea of where their work fits in terms of quality. I like to say it's one thing for your professor to tell you you're a C student. It's something else for you to look at the work of your peers and say, I'm a C student. It's much more real, much more palpable. Plus, you see examples about how you can improve. So that relates to that metacognitive awareness I was talking about. Really having a good sense of your own strengths and weaknesses and how they fit. So hopefully you got a bit of a feel for that from the assess phase. So we're now on to what's called the reflect phase. And the idea is we want to once again give you some repeated structured practice, but this time in a different context. It's not now about giving effective feedback to your peers, but rather it's about learning from the feedback that your peers gave to you. So we're going to walk you through a process, and the first step of it will be going from peer to peer, one after another, looking at the feedback they gave you, but then formally assessing it. So we're going to once again ask you some questions about that feedback. And the idea of the questions is to guide your analysis of the feedback and to try to exercise critical thinking, creative thinking, and communication. Now, by the way, communication is a little different here. This is a context that I like to refer to as receptive communication. Learning to shut up and listen well to other people when they are speaking to you. Okay, those are two different skills. We all know people who can talk like all day, but they don't listen worth crap, right? And to be an effective collaborator, you have to learn how to do both. When you have something important to say, you have to express it well. But you also have to learn how to listen well when other people are expressing their ideas, and to think about them critically, think about them creatively. And if you have enough people doing that, that's where the magic of collaboration happens. So really, it's that listening that this is about. So you're listening to what Peer 1 said about your work. I'm going to ask you certain questions about that. And then you'll do that for Peer 2, and you'll do that for Peer 3. You'll see that the questions I ask will encourage you to think critically, think creatively. And again, because you're going to do it Peer 1, Peer 2, Peer 3, Peer 4, right all the way through, you'll get a lot of repeated structured practice. Let me say at the outset that despite me trying my best to encourage everyone to give great feedback, some people won't. One of the reasons I like to use six in this activity is because I'm pretty sure that with six people giving you feedback, you will get two or three or four good pieces of feedback. And you will get some that are not so good. People who were in a rush and didn't spend the time, or just for whatever reason didn't care enough to do the work like they should. One of the things I like about peer feedback is that it is a little noisy like that. For each bit of peer feedback, that peer might be on the mark. They might be telling you great stuff, or they might be out to lunch. And the lesson I want you to learn from this phase is people are going to give you feedback all your life. You will continually get other people telling you how you could have done something better. And that's good. But just because somebody thinks you should have done it X and X would have been better, that doesn't mean it's so. And so when you get feedback, you should absolutely listen to that feedback. And then you should think critically about it, and you should ultimately decide for yourself whether you agree that if I did things the way this person said, my work would indeed be better. And so that is the task I'm really assigning you here, to go through peer by peer, analyze their feedback, and figure out which ones you agree with and which ones you don't. Once you've done that for all six peers, then there will be two following steps. The next step will be a revision. We will show you your original work. And we will say, you just had a bunch of people tell you how it could be better. Go ahead, make it better. Follow their advice. So this is what we call a formative revision or a formative use of feedback. And so, yeah, you take that information and you figure out how you can rework your piece. This is often a new process for a lot of you. The idea of revising a draft. You got used to it. There's a due date. You submit it, and it's done. Well, often in real life, things don't work that way. You produce something and you get input, you get feedback, and then you make it better and you make it better. And so we're going to ask you to try to do that with your original composition. There's the one you originally composed. Now make it better by using the feedback in an intelligent way. The final step, after you make any revisions you want to make, will be what we call a reflection piece. It's a piece where I want you to show me and the TAs that you are paying attention, that you were thinking about the feedback you received, and you were trying to make rational decisions about which ones to bring into your revision and which ones to not. So you're really going to go through and say, here are the changes I made. So peer 1 said I should do whatever, and I did. But you can also say things like peer 2 maybe told me I have too many big words. But I looked at my big words, and I think they're the right words. And so I just kind of think peer 2 should read more. I think this is right. So I didn't change it. That's fine. Justify to us why you didn't listen to a peer, and that's perfectly fine as well. But that's what you're trying to do in this reflection piece. When the TA is kind of thinking, did this person take the feedback seriously, and did they try to make principled adjustments to their work? This is where you can kind of tell them, yes, I did, and here's what I did. Okay, so that will be the final step. So let me just zoom out a little bit. That's your big task, but let me tell you the challenge of this task and get you on alert for it. When people are giving us critical feedback, our brain, that feels a little bit like they're attacking us. They're saying your work wasn't as good as it could be. And to us, that feels like an attack. And the brain is very sensitive. Remember that sympathetic nervous system? Very sensitive to attack. So often our first reaction when somebody is telling us how we could do better, especially if they don't use the best tone or the best words, our first reaction is often to feel like we're under attack and to kick in that fight or flee system. The problem with the fight or flee system is it doesn't fit in terms of learning from feedback. You're not supposed to be fighting the feedback, and you're not supposed to be running away from it. You're supposed to be sitting there, listening carefully, and thinking about it. This is not your brain's first reaction when it feels like it's under attack. In fact, it drains the blood from the frontal lobes because the body just wants to act, not think. So you're going to have to get over that. For each bit of feedback, I'm actually going to ask you to kind of state your emotions, but then I'm going to ask you to put them aside and just look at the actual advice that's in there and kind of gauge the utility of that. So I just want you to be aware of that, that you'll feel these emotions, you'll feel a little bit of anger, you'll feel confusion, you'll feel whatever. That's perfectly normal, and a big part of the skill of learning from feedback is the ability to recognize those emotions and then in a principled way deal with them somehow. So in this case, I'm going to tell you to acknowledge them and put them aside. But let me give you one real world case. Let's say your boss came into your office and out of the blue hit you with some critical analysis of your work and really suggested that they want you to change things in certain ways, and it catches you by surprise, in which case you often will feel like you're under attack, and especially if you can't flee, you will feel anger and you will maybe want to say something you shouldn't say. In situations like that, it's perfectly reasonable to speak back to the boss and say, okay, you surprised me with this. I need to go for just a little bit of a walk and think about this a little bit. And then I'll come back to you when I've had a chance to digest what you've just said. Okay? Right now, you could even say, right now I'm too emotional. This is actually just surprising me. So those are the kind of strategies that you could use in the real world. You could use it with a significant other too, who suddenly comes at you. You could just say, okay, hang on. If I talk now, I'm going to talk from a place of emotion, and that's not good. Give me a chance to digest what you said and come back to you in a less emotional way. So employ that as you go through. Feel that emotional hit, and then try to put it aside and try to think about what's actually said and try to respond to that intelligently. Okay, cool. I hope you find the process valuable. Again, I know it's a lot of work to do right, but it's time well spent. I will tell you that. The time you're putting into developing these skills is time that will serve you well post graduation and in your life in general. So I will leave it there. I hope you enjoy this phase. Go here.